What's up, guys? Psych Guy is here. Alright, truth be told, I was not gonna do a vid today, but how can I not after watching the highly hyped Chris Hansen interview with Jeffree Star? Very highly touted. In fact, at one point, there were over 30,000 viewers watching the interview. Some person even, you might have caught this, but some person, I don't know why he or she would do this, but this person literally donated $300, which to me, I think it seems rather excessive, especially when conditions are rough and tough right now, with the high unemployment rate and probable worsening of the economy, with the uncertainty of how long this COVID-19 pandemic is going to last. Hope I'm wrong, but yeah, I personally think that these days it's best to save your money because who knows what's around the corner. That's why I refuse to set up any Patreon account right now because save your money, guys, all right? Because you never know when you may need it. It's just a true honor for any and all subscribers of this channel to watch my videos. That is good enough for me. Much love and appreciation. You guys rock. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. But I digress. Let's get back to this interview. Wow. Okay, first things first. Oh, man. First things first. No. But that song, by the way, is so fire in your car with a good stereo system. Man, oh man. Okay. Woo. No. But okay, that interview definitely did not live up to the hype. But then again, in its defense, whatever does in real life if you really think about it from a philosophical standpoint. Most things, events, occurrences, etc., they're all overrated. And the fact that this interview was known, I believe, for about a week or so, well, the longer there is a time gap between an announcement to the actual event, the higher the risk of that something ending up being overrated, right? I mean, just look at the Super Bowls. Perfect example. I personally think that 2 weeks of a gap is too much time between the announcement of the two teams facing one another and the big game. And if it's rather a 1 week gap, you're running less of a risk of the actual game being deemed overrated because you don't have that time buildup, if that makes sense. So yeah, the hype and it being overrated was expected from the start, and understandably so. Not only that, but the interview itself, I thought, was just a wash and didn't add much value. Now, I personally like Chris Hansen and don't have anything against him, and this for sure was not his finest work. But to everyone who is hating on Chris, you gotta understand from the get-go, not taking his side or anything, but from the beginning, Chris had his back against the wall. Now, I've been in Chris's position and had to conduct hundreds of interviews from folks from all walks of life. We're talking from non-killers to killers, and being a psychiatrist, just as same with Chris being a reporter, I can tell you this much. Things are not how it is on Law and Order. How you can just ask a few questions and boom, it's confession time. No, there's a building process. And yeah, understandably so. And Jeffree clearly had the entire leverage from the get-go, from start to finish. This is what I wish Chris did differently. I would have definitely fed into Jeffree's ego, build up that buttercup, kissed up to Jeffree, spoke to Jeffree about personal, warm, empathic things and emphasized Jeffree's strengths and what Jeffree liked and just kept feeding and kissing up to Jeffree, knowing that, okay, it's an hour-long interview. Because you really got one shot, and there are really a few main questions that everyone wants to know the answer to, really. Mainly, what's up with those tweets, those conflicting tweets that Jeffree said many years ago, where Jeffree called out Dahvie by referencing Dahvie's inappropriate acts towards a minor, only to a year or two later for Jeffree to contradict herself and defend Dahvie as if they were best buds again. And if Jeffree were to deny or minimize the past, how does Jeffree explain how Damien, aka Jesse Slaughter, stated that she saw Jeffree witness inappropriate acts with her own eyes, right? Oh, and also, the question about, there are other bandmates who left blood on the dance floor, how back in the day they were questioning about Dahvie's inappropriate behaviors and conduct towards minor, and how Jeffree herself admitted and said that she was more close to Javon Monroe than Dahvie, for example. So why didn't, Jeffree pick up on that? from Javon Monroe, 10 years ago, and do something and call out Dahvie, right? But wait, it seems like she did and call out Dahvie a child predator. And now Jeffree's saying it was just drama. Can you please explain that further, Jeffree? I'm not quite understanding. I would have pressed Jeffree, again, but that's toward the very, very end, right? Something like that. Like, I would have saved the really heavy, main important questions toward the very end, because that would be your best shot at getting any sort of a good, solid answer. If Jeffree was going to give any in the first place, right? I don't know Jeffree Star at all, but Jeffree could have some narcissistic traits. I mean, we all do, really, but some more than others, okay? But if that were the case, then more than likely, it would have been very hard to get any sort of confession. Plus, why would why would she want to potentially incriminate herself and say, yes, she was there and did witness it? Because who knows all the state laws, and if something gets prosecuted later, who knows, could she potentially be an accomplice to this crime? Like, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know any of about the laws or rules. I'm just a psych guy. But maybe that's what she's thinking. But the point is that in these interviews, when you know you're going to ask some confronting, hard-pressing questions, the rule and name of the game is to butter someone up and really play into their narrative. Make them comfortable. This in turn will serve to lower their neurosis, their excitatory and or inhibitory defense mechanisms, in turn making them more vulnerable, and furthermore given a higher likelihood of that individual to enmesh his or her ego with yours, so that this in turn will facilitate a symbiotic relationship between you and the interviewee, so that the strong, transient, biphasic mutual attachment that you have amongst one another would again ease the transmission of information. I mean, there is a reason why cops, police interview suspects for like 4 hours in an interrogation room, right? That first hour, they're building rapport. And usually by that second hour, they then start chipping away from any defenses and or resistance. Same thing with me. When I'm with a client of mine for the first time and I'm interviewing him or her that's new to me, I would spend that first half an hour or so talking about their likes, focusing on things that they like to talk about, fun things, music, games, what they like to do for fun, more of the social history type stuff. I don't jump in after 5 minutes of meeting the individual and say, oh, tell me about why you're getting into fights at school all the time now. Now with Chris, the problem was that, and if you watch the interview, he sort of asked the main question sort of in the beginning. I want to say, I know for sure within that first half an hour of the interview, for sure, okay? Something that should have been saved toward the second half. You see, the key is that in every conversation you have with someone, in any interpersonal interaction, it's all about leverage. And with this interview, it's no different. And right from the get-go, Jeffree had the leverage, which is understandably so. If I were in Chris's position, again, not bashing him or saying anything negative about him, because it was going to be a hard interview, especially to expect someone like a Jeffree to just come out and completely be transparent. That would be very, very hard to attain, right? But if I were Chris, I would have allowed Jeffree to have the stage and have the leverage. I would have asked open-ended, fun-themed, indirect, and innocent questions to help build a therapeutic alliance with Jeffree. And then only to slowly, in the second half, I would have slowly, gradually taken back any of the leverage and control of the interview by shifting and refocusing the interview and the questions from Jeffree and onto the main and more, direct, close-ended, pressing type questions. But it seemed as if Chris did the interview backwards, with the first half being on Dahvie and Jeffree's involvement together and what Jeffree saw, in all about those tweets also. He questioned all that. And then the second half about just Jeffree and almost kissing up to Jeffree, about Jeffree. That's it. But the interview was doomed from the beginning, it almost seemed like. Not only did it lack a good structure, the timing was off, like I alluded to earlier, and timing is everything in life, because just as Eminem said, right? You only got one shot. But no, I mean, even in the beginning, and I want to say a few other times, Chris mentioned, and I'm just doing this on the top of my head and freestyling it from my memory, while it's fresh because I saw this interview like about an hour ago, but it almost seemed like as if Chris a few times alluded to that he knows that this interview is going to get analyzed and criticized. So it almost seemed as if he was just throwing the towel, and more or less unconsciously confessing to this being just a wash of an interview and really adding there's no real added value here. I mean, it was so obvious and clear that Jeffree took command of that interview and dominated it. Chris was overmatched, and even the little things too. I mean, hate her or love her, if you didn't know anything about the case, one would think that Jeffree came out a winner and looked good. Notice how toward the end, she came full circle and reframed the interview from, it being, from her being put on the hot seat the first half to her now taking the torch and brandishing it, now ready to torch Dahvie, cutting any and all ties with him, despite, her well-documented and support for Dahvie. I mean, even notice something simple as Jeffree's dress. Usually I believe Jeffree dresses up in more flamboyant outfits, or at least I know the hair color. Her hair color is usually more like kind of wild and bright. But here, Jeffree was like a subdued blonde in a conservative, somber black, purposely wanting to portray as a grieving widow or something at a funeral. Be easy on me. I'm mourning. Hence, outplaying Chris right there because one would unconsciously show more pity. More pity in the question asking. I mean, not me. I wouldn't have done that. What I said earlier, I would have done the buttercup mode and then toward the end, done the blast mode at the very, very end. But to a lot of others, I can see how they would have gotten, outplayed. And Chris definitely got outplayed, I thought. And again, nothing against him. A little bit disappointed. Usually he's really, really great, top-notch interview. And but I mean, to credit Jeffree, and again, I don't know Jeffree too well, but she strikes me as a master manipulator. That's just what my psychic senses are telling me. Maybe that also plays into that why, Chris might have gotten outplayed. But I don't know. The interview, though, did have a plastic kind of scripted feel to it. I've got to watch this interview later and analyze it more in depth. I'm sorry I have other plans tonight and wanted to get this video out while my thoughts are fresh in my head. Also notice if you watch the interview, aside from the obvious vocalized deflections, look at the nonverbal cues. Look at Jeffree's face, okay? Like maybe in a future vid, when I have more time, I can point out exactly what I mean and show exact clips. But okay, I don't know much about the case, but one of the tools I use as a psychiatrist, which I know police interrogators use also, but we interpret nonverbal cues when someone is lying. The stared look, the looking away a lot. Jeffree was looking off to the side a lot, which is a natural compensatory mechanism for her body to adjust to her lying to help alleviate the excessive neurosis that the act of lying has created or will create. Let's see what else. Oh, the pursed lips. People may purse their lips to counteract the dry mouth that comes with lying, and clearly Jeffree's mouth was dry and periodically, from what I remember, throughout the interview at times having to lick her lips and also take a swig at some sort of drink. I believe it was like an almond milk or something like that a few times. Other bodily signs of Jeffree's lying. That false smile. A false smile doesn't affect the eyes, and it's done with the mouth, and usually people who genuinely smile, the skin around their eyes bunch and wrinkle, but not with Jeffree, not with someone who's lying. Jeffree had this false smile where only the mouth showed some sort of movement, but not the eyes. So yeah, very obvious to know when she was lying. Again, I'll try to make a future Psych Guy video to talk more about the specific topic of how to spot out liars. And like I said, I don't know much about Jeffree, the whole Jeffree Star, Dahvie Vanity situation. I know only a little, but my psyche senses were going off big time while I watched this interview because I could tell when she was lying and when she wasn't. The other thing that really got me was just the obvious act of psychological deflection. What is deflection? Well, deflection is basically the conscious act changing the course of an object and emotion or a thought from its original source. It's usually a narcissistic trait and used a lot of time for control purposes, more so to shift any and all of the blame from oneself onto someone or something else. And clearly that was obvious here in the interview. In fact, anytime Chris would mention anything that was pertinent to the investigation and anything that revolved around anything that could help out the victims, automatic knee-jerk reflex of psychological deflection. It was rather a classic case of Chris Hansen reflecting and Jeffree Star deflecting. Yeah, so some final concluding thoughts into all of this. This is what I was expecting all along. I had a feeling that this was going to be a reflecting, deflecting type video. In fact, if you knew me in real life, I actually told a few of my close friends about the title of my video, how I was going to actually call it Deflecting and Reflecting, something like that, and release this video before the actual interview came out, because I've seen many of these similar types of situations before. So I somewhat knew what was more than likely going to happen, but wanted to be as objective and fair. So I waited to let the interview do the talking for itself. And unfortunately, it did not say much.